Hello, everybody. This is Lucas Skinner, and you're listening to At the Buzzer. Today, we're going to be ranking our top 10 power forwards in the NBA. One disclaimer before we start is I would like to say that I do not have Anthony Davis on my list or LaMarcus Aldridge because they were both listed as centers on Basketball Reference last season, and that's what I based my whole entire list off of. And Christian, he does have Anthony Davis and LaMarcus Aldridge on his list because he based it off what he believes each player plays. So at number 10, I have Kevin Love of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Last season, in 22 games, he averaged only about 17 points, 11 rebounds, and 2 assists. It was only on 39% field goal percentage and 36% from the three-point line, but he shoots 90% from the free throw line. He was injured for most of last season as he missed 60 games.
Number 10, I also went with Kevin Love. I believe he was good enough to be in the top 10, but also he kind of had limited amount of games as he was hurt a lot, and he was on a very bad Cleveland Cavaliers team. I'd like to see him come back healthy this year and see if he can bring some leadership to this young Cavs team and hopefully be back to normal.
At number 9, I have the young power forward of the Chicago Bulls, Lauri Markkanen. Last season, he averaged about 19 points and 9 rebounds. He shot about 43% from the field, which isn't amazing for a big man, but a lot of his shots come from the three-point line, where he shoots about 36%. He also is a really good free throw shooter at 87%. He's a young power forward that can continue to develop, and a lot of people foresee him to be a 20-point per game scorer this upcoming season.
All right, so it looks like we have different ones for this one. I went with Julius Randle, the young forward who's just signed with the New York Knicks. He's a guy that I see a lot of improvement in almost every year. He takes a pretty big step. He's 6'9", and he is 24 years old. Last year, playing 73 games, averaging about 21.5, 9 rebounds, and about 3 assists. He's also improved his three-point shot, I would say, relatively a lot, as he's now up to almost 34.5% from three. So he's improved his game over the years a lot, but his offensive versatility is pretty underrated among power forwards, I think, and I like to see how he does on this young New York Knicks team, as he was their big free agent signing.
At number 8, that's where I have Julius Randle of the New York Knicks. Christian pretty much said everything I needed to about Julius Randle. This past season, he averaged about 21 points, 9 rebounds, and 3 assists on 52% shooting. I feel as though he was a solid young player, or he still is a solid young player, and I do see him being a pretty solid player for the New York Knicks, as he is what appears to be their best player going into the season, unless one of their young players like Dennis Smith Jr. or RJ Barrett take a significant step, or if RJ Barrett comes into the league ready.
Okay, so I went for number 8, I went with LaMarcus Aldridge of the San Antonio Spurs. He's a guy that can play center, as Luke talked about early on, but he's also a guy that I see I mostly think of as a 4, so that's why I put him on my list. But, I mean, you can put him on as a 5 or a 4. Last year he played in 81 games, averaging about 21 points, 9 rebounds, and about 2.5 assists. He's a very good player. He's usually an all-star, as he's been 7 times in his career. He's a 5-time All-NBA player. He's just a very solid veteran player that can score, and he's a pretty solid rebounder. And I like to see what he can do with this Spurs team that I believe is very underrated and is poised for a big season.
At number 7, I have the 22-year-old power forward from the Atlanta Hawks, John Collins. He took a big jump this past season, averaging just under 20 points and 10 rebounds, along with 2 assists. He shot about 56% from the field and 35% from the three-point line. The only problem is a lot of people would like to see John Collins run the center position, but when he ran the center position, the Atlanta Hawks all their advanced defensive stats appeared to be pretty low, and John Collins would pretty much get scored on at will when he played center. So if John Collins can continue to work on his defense and even more of his offensive game, I could see him being an all-star in the future.
Absolutely. Number 7, I went with Al Horford of the 76ers. Al Horford's a very solid player. He's a very good defender on the inside. He's a guy that can play multiple positions. I see him as a 4 and a 5. This year he'll play more of the 4, I believe, with Joel Embiid. So that will be a fun tandem to watch on the inside. Both are very solid defenders. He averaged about 13.5 points per game last season, about 7 rebounds, and about 4 assists. So at the center position, he's a very good playmaker, or power forward, center position. He's one of those tweeners that can play either. He's a very solid playmaker, and he's a good leader for any team, really, as he's been in the big moments in the playoffs, and he plays very well in the playoffs. Last year, he shot 36% from 3 and about 54% from the field, which is a very solid percentage, judging on how many threes he shoots. And he's a guy who's also improved his three-pointer tremendously as the years go on. And I'd like to see him and Joel Embiid team up this year and have a very successful season together and see how far those two can take the Sixers in the playoffs.
At number 6, I also have a Philadelphia 76er, but mine is Tobias Harris. He was listed as a power forward last season, even though he'll more than likely play the small forward position this season. The past season, he played for the Clippers and the 76ers. He was a stretch 4 and averaged about 20 points and 8 rebounds on 49% shooting and just under 40% from the three-point line, and he shot a great 87% from the free throw line. Tobias Harris was in all-star conversations this past season, but since he was in the Western Conference, there are so many great players out there that he did not make the cut for the all-star team this past season because he was on the Los Angeles Clippers for the first half of the season.
Yeah, so you had Tobias Harris in your power forwards, and last episode I had him in my small forwards, so he will not be on my list. That's just a quick disclaimer real quick. So next spot, number 6, I have Kristaps Porzingis. Kristaps is one of the better young players in the league, but he was out all last season. He's also got, I think, one of the more bigger upsides in the league. The only reason why I have him at number 6 and not closer to the top is because he's coming off that injury, and I'm not sure how well he'll be able to play coming off that injury right away. He's a very good shooter, listed at 7'3". I don't know with the height changes if he's anything different now, but at 7'3", a guy that can shoot. He shot about 36. He shot about 36% from 3 for his entire career thus far, and he's averaged about 18 points per game, 7 rebounds, and about an assist. So his playmaking, he's not a playmaker, but he can score. And honestly, I'd like to see him improve his rebounding, but I think him and Luka will be a tough combo in the Western Conference. I don't know if they'll be good enough to reach the playoffs, but I really like Kristaps' upside as he was an all-star in just his 3rd season. And I'd just like to see if he can really take that next step coming off that major knee injury.
I have Kristaps Porzingis at number 5. Like Christian said, the last season he played in was for the New York Knicks, where he averaged 23 points and 7 rebounds. For his height, he's definitely not the best rebounder, but he's a good stretch 4 and definitely has very high potential, especially on the offensive and the defensive end of the court.
All right, so number 5, I went with Draymond Green. He's a guy who doesn't put up a whole lot of points, as he averaged about 7.5 points per game last season. But he also averaged about 7.5 rebounds and about 7 assists. So he's a very important piece to that Warriors team, as anybody who watches the Warriors knows. And he's one of the better defenders in the league, as he can guard all 5 positions. He can guard the center position at least at some points in the game. He's an undersized forward, but he makes up for it with his hard work and defensive abilities. He's a 3-time All-Star. He's a 3-time NBA champion. And he's a 5-time member of the All-Defensive team. He's just a very accomplished player. He was once the Defensive Player of the Year in the 2016-2017 season. I really like watching Draymond play and how he lifts the Warriors. His shooting has gone down over the last few seasons, as he was at least a respectable 3-point threat. until these last couple of years his 3-point shot has taken a dip. So I'd like to see him bring those numbers back up. And he only played in 66 games last year, so I'd like to see him stay more healthy, as he's one of my favorite players to watch in the league, and one of the more I still think he's one of the more underrated and underappreciated players.
Yeah, I have Draymond Green at number 4. The impact he makes on the court as a leader and on the defensive side of the court is at the top of the league. He's definitely one of the best defenders in the league. He averaged about 7 points, 7 rebounds, and 7 assists, but his leadership and defense is what ranks him so high.
Yeah. So number 4, I went with Pascal Siakam, and going back to Draymond, I like Draymond as a player more than Pascal Siakam, and I also think he's definitely had the better career, but I think going into this year, I give the slight edge to Pascal, as his scoring ability is way better than Draymond's, I believe, and I think his defense is getting to the level where he's able to guard multiple positions, and I believe he's 6'11". So putting Pascal there, that's why I have him over Draymond as of right now, but we'll see if he's able to improve. He was a big piece to the Raptors championship last year, and with Kawhi Leonard gone, I think he's going to be their new star, I guess I would say. Although I don't think he's got the scoring abilities of a Kawhi Leonard or anyone like that. I think he's a unique player in his own way, and he's got a solid jump shot for his size, and I'd like to see him improve his scoring this year and maybe average around 20 points per game, and see what he can do as the main guy on that Raptors team, and see how far they can go.
Yeah, I have Pascal Siakam at number 3. In the past season, he won the most improved player, averaging about 17 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists. He's a very good defensive player and a solid offensive player. He shot about 55% from the field, 37% from the 3-point line, and 79% from the free throw line. Pascal Siakam is a player I'm super high on, and we can see if he can take the jump to be about a 20-point per game scorer this upcoming season, which he should be able to do with the departure of Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah, absolutely. Number 3, I went with Blake Griffin. Blake Griffin, I think, is coming into the league. He was one of the more hyped prospects, I think, that we had seen, but that was strictly because of his athleticism. I feel like they weren't understanding the rest of his game. But Blake is one of those guys that has made tremendous improvements in his all-around game. Every year, he adds something to it. He's become a better ball handler as the years go on, and something that I really noticed over the past 2 seasons, especially last year, was his 3-point shooting abilities. He's become a way better 3-point shooter. In his rookie season, he shot 29% from 3, while only shooting 0.3 threes per game. And then now this season, he shot about 36% from 3 on 7 threes a game, and that's a tremendous jump. So it just shows it shows his work ethic, and he played in 75 games, averaging about 24.5, or he averaged 24.5 points, about 7.5 rebounds, and about 5.5 assists. So Blake is just one of the better all-around players in the league, and I think he's very underrated at this point as a scorer, and what he can do for a team is, I think he carried the Pistons last year to the playoffs, and I'd like to see him stay healthy this year and what he can do on that Pistons team, and see where he can take them potentially I think they can be as good as a 5 seed at best, I believe, but we'll see.
Yeah, number 2 is where I have Blake Griffin, since I have Anthony Davis on my center list. Blake Griffin is a great offensive player who averaged about 25 points and 8 rebounds along with 5 assists. As Christian stated, Blake Griffin has evolved his game so much since he came into the league about 10 seasons ago. He now has a reliable 3-point jump shot, and he's a pretty solid ball handler and playmaker, which were not as high as they are now when he was first coming into the league, as he was viewed as a high flyer, and that was about it. But his first season in the NBA, where he did average about 21 points and 11 rebounds, I believe, he may have took a step back on the rebounding end and maybe on the flashy dunks, but at the end of the day, he is a more solid and all-around player now, and he's definitely developed his game to be where I believe the number 2 power forward in the entire NBA.
Yeah, for sure. Before I go to my number two, a few more things on Blake that I find interesting. He, I believe, was second in the league last year in step back threes behind only James Harden, possibly Luka Doncic, but I believe he was. I believe Blake was second, and also with the rumors out of Detroit are that he could possibly be traded at the trade deadline or before if things get off to a rough start. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye out on teams that could potentially trade for an all-star big man that can show flashes as a very solid playmaker. But going to number two, I went with Anthony Davis. As Luke said, he's on his center list, but I have him as a power forward for mine. This one was tough for me on where to list him because he really can play either one. He's kind of like LaMarcus Aldridge or now Horford, but it's just I think he wants to play the four, but really I really see him as a five. But I mean, he's really for the most part in his career he's played the four. Um, Last year he didn't play in a whole lot of games due to his situation, but his health has always been a concern for me. He played 56 games last year, averaging about 26 points. He averaged 12 rebounds and about 4 assists. So all the skills are there, as he's a very solid playmaker. He's really improved his 3-point shooting. He's a very efficient scorer, and he had 9.5 win shares last year, which is very impressive to me. And not to mention his defense is very good inside, and he can also play the perimeter defense at a solid rate. So I'd like to see what he can do with the Lakers, as I see him as a guy that could win the MVP this year. That's something I've been waiting to see Anthony Davis do for a while. So I'd like to see him go out and play with LeBron and how good he really can be.
So number 1, I have Giannis Antetokounmpo of the Milwaukee Bucks. This past season, he was the most valuable player, and he was a top 3 finisher and the defensive player of the year. He averaged about 28 points, 13 rebounds, and 6 assists. Giannis obviously is one of the best players in the entire NBA, and I have him at the number 1 power forward. He won the most improved player a couple of seasons ago, and this past season he averaged, like I said, he averaged 28 points, and it was on 58% from the field and 73% from the free throw line. The only true knock on his game is his 26% from the 3-point line, but we shall see if he's able to develop that through the rest of his career, as he is still under 25 years old and definitely one of the future talents of the NBA. And on the NBA GM survey that came out yesterday, as we're recording this video, 86% of the general managers said that they would, if they were starting a team with any player, starting a franchise, what player would they pick? And 86% of them said Giannis Antetokounmpo. So that goes to show you how great he is at such a young age.
Yeah, number 1, I also went with Giannis. Luke already mentioned his stats and all his accolades. He's definitely one of the better players in the league, and you can argue that he's the best, as he won MVP last season. He's a guy that I would like to see win it for a second time in a row, and he's one of those rare talents that I can see for the next 5 years will always be in the conversation for MVP and Defensive Player of the Year. And you can also make the argument that he's the most dominant player we've seen since Shaquille O'Neal in his prime. So, yeah, I'd like to see him improve his 3, but I honestly don't think it's that big of a deal, as he's so dominant with just taking it inside and dunking on people.
So the episode you will get before this is going to be our power rankings, and the episode that you'll get after this is going to be ranking our centers in the NBA, and then after that it should be about the time the NBA season has begun, maybe be about a weekend, and we will be able to talk more about current topics in the NBA. So thank you for listening.